Hi, friends and friends of friends. Welcome to the Still Podcast Author Series Season 2. This season's guests are authors who write books for children, the young readers to teenagers, and even those who are still young at heart. During each episode, you will learn more about the writer and their books. I bet you will find a new author and new books to love. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoy an episode, please leave a comment or respond to one of the poll questions at the end of an episode, or follow me on one of my social accounts. And of course, tune in next time. Welcome back to Season 2 of the Still Podcast Author Series. Joining me today is cool dad and author Alan Brokken, who has a 6-series book set. Is it fair to say it's a Christian fantasy book set? Okay.
Yeah, the way some people have described it, it's like Little House on the Prairie meets Chronicles of Narnia.
I love it. That's perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me here.
No, I appreciate it. This is going to be fun.
So I see that your series is called Tower of Light. And it's, once again, it's 6 books. It started off, as one and grew, and it's super exciting. Can you tell me a little bit about the books, I guess, as a whole first?
Sure. Well, so I think the best way to set this up is like I said, like I've got actual reviews that say something to the effect of it's Little House on the Prairie meets Chronicles of Narnia. The way I kind of describe it, if you've got that reference of Little House on the Prairie, imagine if Laura Ingalls picks up the armor of God. Right, so she's got the helmet of salvation. So when she goes to do battle with the forces of evil, she doesn't bonk her head. That's kind of the idea. But like most middle grade, it starts out and there's a nice family and they're all fine, and then mom and dad disappear under mysterious circumstances. Because as you know, middle grade, you have to get rid of the parents. Like it's just a rule. Like I didn't make that rule, but check out any middle grade thing, the parents have disappeared. So they disappear. And the kids wake up and they find themselves on an adventure to make breakfast, because it's really hard when you live on the frontier and there are no adults, right? And so over a period of time, nobody shows up. Like there were people that were supposed to help them, they don't. Finally, kids go to church and something's weird, something's off. They're getting some fake news about their dad. And so they got to go home and crack open the good book to keep the Tower of Light shining, to kind of help their parents get home. And that's kind of the gist of the first book. I won't go in much deeper, but that's kind of the whole point. Is it's basically the kids, as the series progresses, there are different sort of underlying Christian values that get kind of pulled out. So each different book in the series has a different value it's focused on. And the first one's kind of discernment, right? Like they're getting some fake news, and how are they going to unravel that fake news? They need to go back to the good book to find out what's true and right and keep the Tower of Light shining.
Okay. And the first book is Light of Mine. Okay. And Lauren, Aiden, and Ethan are your main characters. It looks like they're the main characters throughout.
Yeah. And so in the background, you can kind of see them there. That's from book 6, is the cover of book 6 in the background. But yeah, Lauren, Aiden, and Ethan are my own kids in real life that I wrote the story for. So they were kind of ages 5 to 11 when I was starting to write this story. Now they're adults. My Lauren's now 20. Oh, she's 24. It's horrible. I can't even believe it. So it's been a long time I've been working on this whole thing. But yeah, they're grown up, but they were kids at the time I was writing it. And part of it was I wanted to do things. I wanted to take their stuffed animals and give them a great story and that kind of thing. And so we have fun characters like Meow Meow, her kitten, and we have this nice plushie Meow Meow that goes with the story. He tells the story. We've got audiobooks that he'll tell the story. But the whole point here is it was really something. It was a labor of love for my children that apparently other kids like too.
Awesome. And so did they start off with those ages of 5 through 13 and then grow throughout the book series?
Well, the book series actually end to end only takes about a couple months. Like the actual adventure of the series takes a very short period of time. And some of that was intentional in that it's just action packed. Like one of the things, like you'll see in some of the reviews, like it just doesn't let me go. The action is going, right? Like, and that was part of the audience, right? If you've got kids, in that 10, 10 plus or minus a couple of years age, and you're trying to do a family read aloud, it's got to be moving or you have lost them, right? Like they're going to wander off and go find an iPad somewhere. So my goal with it was to keep it moving, and then just because of the arc of the story, that couple months total end to end just kind of works.
Okay, great. And then can you tell me a little bit about maybe each character a little bit?
Yeah, so Lauren's the older sister, and like the actual older sister, Lauren is sort of the archetype, kind of mom when mom's not around person. Like older sisters tend to be that way, and the real Lauren's that way. One of the things I wanted to highlight about her in general, though, was as as the real Lauren is, she's very thoughtful, right? And so there's a lot of places where she gets really thoughtful, and you're going to find that in there. And because of her thoughtfulness, the children want to follow her. Like they ask her for advice, they want to know, and
Mhm.
that's very much the way my own kids were, right? And so she's kind of the leader, and then Aiden, the middle child, he's a builder, and so the real life Aiden, he's a builder. He liked to build things, engineer things, does a lot with 3D printing these days. I've got a lot of fun little things he's made, little tchotchkes that go with the series that he's made up 3D printing. So, but and so that comes out, right? And so there's a lot of building that happens, or figuring things out, like mechanically, of what's going on that are in the story. And to be honest, I had to do a lot of research to make that work out. Like I'm not from the 1800s, but this thing is set up in the 1800s. And so like there's a point in the fifth book where the wagon breaks. And I had it in my head that, oh, well, you could just fit, like, I want to break the wagon, so I'm going to break a wagon wheel, and you could just fix that, right? No, you can't just fix a wagon wheel out on the prairie. That was actually disastrous, right? And so I did a lot of research for it, and some of that research comes through in what Aiden chooses to do and how he does things. And then Ethan, the youngest child, is really he's kind of the heart of the series, like in a lot of ways. Like
Mhm.
he has this conscience about doing right and good, and if of anybody in the story, like he's the one that's like you'll see him say periodically, just sissy pray, like we don't know what to do, let's pray for help, that kind of stuff. And I didn't realize the impact the kids in the story would have on other kids. But I've gotten some Instagram like messages from moms saying, "I really appreciate this story because I've seen my own kids behave like the kids you've written about." And like there was one particular story where she was going like the mom was going to have a medical surgery, and she was clearly distraught about this around her 5-year old, and her 5-year old says, "Mama, pray." And the rest of the conversation, she's like, "That sounded just like Ethan from the story we were reading." And so for me, I mean, like, just your heart just melts to hear these stories of, and that was something the real life Ethan would have done at that age, right? The best part about writing this with my kids in it is we've captured sweet moments throughout the series. So like Ethan, when he was that age, would call oatmeal oatmeal. Okay. So that's in the story because he would have said oatmeal. Well, that's such a popular thing with parents that read the stories to their kids. I actually had to make a recipe and post it on my blog of Ethan's original oatmeal, right? Like, had to have that out there. So it's
Mhm.
that kind of thing. There's a lot of those things that I know are in the stories and that my kids pick up on because they were those kids. But I'm looking forward to someday, grandkids, hopefully, God willing, that we can share those little tidbits with as well.
Right. Oh, that is so special. I know sometimes I'll come across some writing of my son's writing about something that
Mhm.
happened, like on a trip. And I'm just so thankful he wrote that down because there's no way we would have remembered it. And so
Right.
you have it in stories, and not only are you remembering it, it's benefiting others. That's
Oh
awesome.
yeah, no, and it's been cool too. Like the first book, they were all a lot more invested in just because of the age and what was going on. And the later books took me a long time to get to the second book in the series, right? To actually get it written down. And so as they were much older by the time I got to the second book. And then the ones after that, like just less and less. Like they were late teens by the time I got to the final books. But they've had an impact on each one, and probably one of the more fun things, since these are self-published, like I have like all the control, right?
Mhm.
So for the cover of this book, you can kind of see there's kind of this scary person in the background, right? Like
Mhm.
that. Well, my cover artist is like, I don't have that. I don't have anything like that. Like I was trying to describe what I wanted. I can't find a bad guy holding a shield over magma, right? Like I can't find that as clip art somewhere. So in the end, we talked Lauren, my eldest, we talked her into dressing up in this Jedi cloak with a mask and stuff and standing on top of a table and green screened up the place. Like we went to the party store and put up green all over the place. So she's standing there holding it was a kitchen pan, like a big cookie sheet. She was holding a cookie sheet over a potted plant pot, like a giant potted plant pot was the original photo. But I've got stuff like that in here too, where they were all good. They're always good sports about helping me out with the stories.
That is awesome. And I got to tell you, that's my favorite title, Armor of God. And the cover, it's just beautiful. We're kind of skipping around here. That's book 4.
Yeah.
But it's just beautiful. And funny enough, I'm still trying to build on my Christian knowledge, and so I'm
Mhm.
doing a 90-day New Testament
Okay.
thing,
Cool.
reading the
Yeah.
New Testament in 90 days, and I happened to read Ephesians
Uh huh.
today. Just total happen. And of course, as you know, that's where they discuss the
Right.
armor of God and the helmet of salvation and the
Hmm.
belt of truth,
Yep.
shield of faith.
Hmm.
And of course, I knew nothing of this. And I was like, this
Right.
is so appropriate for you.
Right.
Before that, they talked about the children of the light and
Mhm.
living in the light. And all of that seems to be really focused in your book. So I
Right.
thought,
Yeah. No. That's really so. Each book has a different sort of theming verse, right? And so obviously the verse from Ephesians is in Armor of God. Book 5, Wellspring of Life, is guard your heart because it's the wellspring of life. For me, that was sort of I had some thematic things I was trying to do, and Wellspring of Life just kind of came out of it, right? Like that. But
Mhm.
it also points back to that's the name of our homeschool co-op. So our homeschool co-op was the Wellspring Community, and that was their verse. And so the other thing is I brought in some of my kids' friends into that story. So their friends from homeschool co-op are also in the story series too, and they kind of fit their character and that kind of stuff.
I love it. I'm going to have to read the series.
Oh well,
I'm
I
definitely
I
going to.
encourage you to read the series.
Yes, no, I will. And so middle grade
Mhm.
age range, are we talking 8 to 12?
Yeah, so the way to think about the series is it was written as a family read aloud, right? So we have a child as young as 5 and as old as 11 at the beginning of this story, like in that or 12 in that ballpark. So kids relate to, kids in that age range relate to the characters. But there are some intense scenes, some scary stuff. There's a smoke dragon in the last book and things like that. There's some stuff that's kind of scary. So the guidance I've gotten from a lot of parents, they think 7 is kind of about the bottom end, like where
Okay.
to start. Although if you don't, if your child's not terribly sensitive, then maybe you could do something younger. But 7's kind of what parents have said. And that's family read aloud. It's a solid third grade reader from like evaluation perspective. So there's a company called Lexile that actually will score your books to tell you what is the reading level, and so it's like a upper third grade, lower fourth grade reading level consistently through the series. And then we also have homeschool curriculum that goes with that. And so that is sort of unit studies for third to sixth grade.
Right,
And
and
so you were talking about Armor of God. What I'm so excited about, you're actually the first person to know this. Like, I literally got this book today. Like, this is the first printing of the all 6 series unit
okay.
study. So this is 24 weeks of studies. But what's really cool, you were talking about Armor of God.
Mhm.
I have projects in here. I have Armor of God projects. So like, there's one to build the shield of faith in here. Like, there's a bunch of different stuff like that. I was trying to find it, but it's not popping out where easily. Oh, here we go. Well, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, I saw on your website all of this. You have all these different units of
mhm.
study, which looks very exciting. So is it for with the homeschooled child in mind, or someone who just wants to um deepen their connection with God?
So the way the questions are set up is it is a homeschool unit study. So if you wanted to
Okay.
do a language arts program for a year, there's 24 weeks of content here. You could cover a year of homeschool instruction in language arts and you'd be fine. That being said, the way they're set up, so each day there's a chapter you read, or maybe a little bit more than a chapter, depending on where you're at in the study. There's some reading, and then there's an excerpt that's pulled out where you ask questions. And so there's two types of questions. One is just kind of raw comprehension, like, did you understand what was read? But then there are also discussion questions that talk about deeper faith things. And so when the Hip Homeschool Moms did an evaluation of it, so they're a homeschool mom organization, lots of Christian moms in there. What they liked about it was they said it brought the family together because of those questions. Like, it's something you could do. You could just read a chapter with your child in the night with unit study and just talk about it, right? And hand them the coloring pages that are in there to do while you're reading, right? That kind of thing. But the bigger thing for me is, at a more fundamental level, is I believe that practical literacy is the gateway to biblical literacy, right? If your child can't read, they can't read the Bible, right? Like, that's just true. And so how do we accelerate that? How do we make that better? And so a big focus I have is on providing audiobooks to go with the printed books, because my own child had challenges reading. And so we had to read out loud to him while he followed along. Well, that's not always practical. Like, you have other kids, you have things going on. It's hard to do that. And so we provide these audiobook players to go with it so they can read while listening. That's not a screen, right? Because if I give you an iPad, you're going to iPad, right? Or a phone. You're going to go do something else. On the other hand, if I have a device like this, I can just hear the stories. I can follow along with my finger, and I can build my reading skills, which is actually a proven educational thing. Like there's academic studies that show if you want to accelerate a child's reading skills, read while listening, and that's the fastest way to do it.
Yes, that's you don't know, I teach sixth grade
Okay.
English. So, and I've got students who struggle with reading, and I love, you mentioned finger falling specifically,
Mhm.
which is so important for them to
Oh
finger
yeah.
follow. So thank you
Right.
for that.
Well, and so the other thing is, we have the Tower of Light. Okay, and so this is the audiobook player as this tower, and a lot of families like this because they can kind of set it on a table and everybody can listen at the same time. It's not it's more of a family thing.
Mhm.
And then you can play Legos with this. This is like Lego guy sized.
Oh, this is awesome. And I didn't even know these were things, these audio players.
Well, so
So
I
great.
partnered with Mega Voice Audio Bibles. So they're a company that's been producing these solar audio devices. So you might not have seen that, but that's a solar panel.
Okay.
Um,
Wow.
to put the Bible all over the world. And
Okay.
so they put out tens of thousands of these a year for missions organizations. And I partnered with them because I wanted something that was durable. Like, I've since I had some boys play test this in a park. Like, they drop kicked it, threw it down the slides, all that. They're super durable, water resistant, all the things you need for active boys, right? But then it's kind of locked in the content. Like, what's on here's on here. And then I'm able to actually provide an audio Bible with every one of them, right? And so one of the things is, like, for this particular version, what I'm doing is I have the Good and Evil Ultimate Comic Action Bible that I can put with my player, so you can practice reading, a version of the Bible that is age appropriate, right? So part of the thing too that you may or may not know is that most Bibles are 10th grade or up from a reading level perspective.
Mm. Okay, I
If I
believe
give
that.
that to a second or third grade reader, they're they're fundamentally challenging the vocabulary they're trying to absorb. So by providing something like this, you're giving them something that's closer to their age reading level, and they can read while listening, and it just accelerates the whole process.
That sounds wonderful. Going back, so we have the first book, Light of Mine.
Mhm.
Then the second book is Still Small Voice,
Yep.
which looks, I'm a big fan of second books in series for some
Uh-huh.
reason. And it looks really exciting with the uncle, thank you, right? And they're on the path, and then their uncle leads them astray, and then they have to save their
Yeah.
uncle.
Yeah. So the deal with this is, each book has sort of a different challenge that kids might run into, right? And so in
Mhm.
this case is the underlying thing is their conscience is telling them one thing, like they feel called to do one thing, but the adults in their life, they're specifically their uncle, but some others as the story goes along, are telling them to do something else. And so what do you do when the adults in your life are asking you to violate your conscience? Not that we would have that problem today in society or anything like that. Not that that would actually happen.
Right. That is some
But no,
powerful stuff.
that's the underlying value of it. And the other thing is in this story, their uncle isn't exactly a believer, and so there's just
Mhm.
dealing with that, right? Like, and that happens to kids. Like, as Christian kids might be growing up and their family unit is that way, but the extended family is not, and so they have some conflicts and things like that. And the other thing about it is, if you I don't know if you picked up on it, but you've got this circus tent, right? As a kid, the circus was like this big magical thing, and so I needed to throw a circus in there somewhere.
Right, and it's certainly appropriate with the timing.
Right. Yeah. No. Like
Yes.
late 1800s,
Yeah,
a
thank you.
circus would have been a thing, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of fun stuff about that I was able to do with that book.
Awesome. And then the third book is Fear No Evil, and
Yes.
they're lost in the valley of darkness.
hmm So this is very interesting. So I wrote this book while I was traveling for work. I was on planes a lot, and this book was basically done. So this is Fear No Evil. The book's basically done. And I left it like it was a handwritten manuscript. I left in a pocket on an airplane, and I was devastated because it was just gone. You walk off an airplane, you don't get to walk back on, and it was just gone. And I went back to, like, I did all the lost and found. Went back to I was through that same airport every week for the next 2 months, and I would go to the gates and I would ask, and it was just gone.
And we're not talking the book, we're talking your manuscript,
Yeah,
right?
my manuscript, right? Yeah, the first manuscript of the story, and it's just gone. And so you've written a book, that's devastating because it was handwritten, right? It
Mhm,
wasn't. There's no cloud backup or anything to that. So anyway, that was way back in like 2018 that happened.
mhm.
So the book didn't come out until 2020. Well, what would be a better book to have been out in 2020 about some kids that are isolated, lost and alone in a valley of darkness than this story, right? Like I had parents tell me this was the story my kid needed right now, right? Because
Right.
it's like, how do you deal with that? How do you find courage when everything looks dark around you and you're isolated? So anyway, God no, like God, I lost it on purpose, and it came back around when it needed to come back around.
So wait, did it find you, or did
No, I had
you
to
had to
just rewrite it.
rewrite everything?
I had to
Okay.
rewrite it,
Oh
and
my
that's why
gosh.
that it would have been ready in 2018, but it didn't come out until 2020.
Okay. And that was certainly when we needed it. So,
Yeah,
okay. And then Armor of God. I think you
yeah. So Armor of God, it like part of the everything. Every book has a 3-letter title. At some point, I needed Armor of God. Now, what was interesting about this one to me was I actually like all of my books. I signed something specific. Like if you get a book from me that's signed, each book has kind of a phrase I use. And that one is kind of different because you don't see a lot of sermons on sort of the boots of the gospel of peace. That's it talks about your feet being shod by the gospel of peace, right?
okay.
And that wasn't how I intended it to be. Like, I didn't intend it to necessarily be this evangelistic book in the way that it turned out, because there's one character in the story that I intended to be like the permanent bad guy for the rest of the series. Like, in my head, this is an irredeemable bad person that's not going to turn to the light, going to be the bad guy, going to be like the big bad. And along the way, God just put on my heart, no, this we need to redeem this character, and the 5-year-old has to do it. And so in the midst of the story, he ends up with these boots that sort of are part of the story and the sort of saving of people in the story. But the gist of it comes down to, I like having to figure out how a 5-year-old is going to tell a stranger the gospel message. Like, what words would a 5-year-old do to talk about Jesus and being saved and all of that to someone he barely knows? Like, that was a hard literary thing to do. Like, it took a lot of work to like come up with that. But a lot of feedback from parents and others that just came off beautiful. It was like the right thing for that story and for the set of characters to be. And what's interesting is I've got some kids I kind of work with regularly that they tell me about, like, that particular character's redemption mattered to them. Like, that hooked them. They remember that.
Wonderful. Well, redemption stories, they're so powerful because it tells us that no matter how big we screw up in life, we can be redeemed, we can
Right.
fix it.
Absolutely.
Yes. Wow. Okay. And then Wellspring of Life is the fifth book.
Yeah, so this was kind of interesting. Like as a writer, like you probably heard these terms. Are you a plotter or a pantser?
Mm-hmm.
Do you make a detailed plot of what you're going to do, and then or you just make it up as you go along? And for me, I'm kind of a hybrid of that, in that I usually write what I call a flight plan. Like there's some big scenes in my mind I want to happen, and I know the general order of that, but then everything else has to kind of get stitched together. And so I just had this idea that I really wanted to have them show up in a place that looked like a geode. I don't know why. I grew up near this place called Geode State Park when I was a kid, and geodes and crystal things were a big deal, and I wanted to have this crystal thing. And so then it turned into, well, you can have a wellspring inside this place that's this geode cave. And then it just kind of worked from there, because in the end, they need to find the wellspring of life to sort of save the father in the story. And I'm giving away kind of an important point of the whole
Okay.
plot, but just to say they needed to find it. But like getting to kind of come up with why there was this geode cave with this crystal, fountain with like, that was a lot of fun. Like I just had a lot of fun with it. Um, and this story also got to, like I said earlier, kind of got to bring in some of their friends that were their
Mhm.
real life friends, that then their real life friends liked being in the story, right? But these
Right.
are all now like older teenagers too, and so they're giving me feedback on how the 10-year-old version of them should be.
Yeah, but these older teenagers will eventually have families of their own and be able to read the stories, and that's awesome. And then Demolishing the Stronghold.
Yeah, demolishing the stronghold. So the thing about this book is it is kind of God's victory. Like that's the theme, and like there's a point where it's sort of said to that effect that we didn't have the victory, God had the victory in this kind of thing. And one of my beta readers was just like, her only feedback was, I'm crying here. This was perfect. It was like the
Oh.
pin that the whole series needed, right? And so I'm really glad about that. Probably the weird thing is the whole series, I'm trying to keep things in the prairie, right? Like in the end, the theme is sort of Little House on the Prairie, 1800s. There are no dragons in the prairie. Like that was not something I was never going to put a dragon in. I didn't want a dragon. I wasn't doing that. And my fans kept telling me, Mr. Brokken, you have to have a dragon. Mr. Brokken, you have to have a dragon. You have to have one. And I'm like, I don't want one. That's not the story. That's not how this works. And so, because in the story, there's this idea of the darkness, and it's this kind of smoke that fills up things and it causes evil things to occur. I kind of came up with this idea of a dragon made out of smoke. And so it's kind of a unique thing. I've never seen anything like it in any other fantasy stuff. It fits the character of the story and how it kind of all played out. But it was kind of a neat literary thing. But then because part of my reason I didn't want a dragon was, well, if I have a dragon that's flying, now the kids have to fly. Like you can't fight the flying dragon if you can't fly. So how am I going to do that? And that's where the hot air balloon comes from. And part of my question was that even like a thing? Like, say 1860s America, what American frontier was a hot air balloon thing. And actually, I had no idea this, but lighter than air balloons using hydrogen were a thing in the Civil War. I
Mhm.
had no idea. And so I did all this research and figured it out. And so yes, it's airships versus dragons is what it turns into, without being truly steampunk, right? Like there's
Right.
not. I really like, I call this prairie punk, right? Because it's prairie with a little bit of fantasy. It's not steam powered mecha things or whatever.
Prairie Punk. I love it. So now, are there more books in the series, or is this the final one?
So that was the last of that series, which
Okay.
has a nice pin in it. But I'm not done writing. Um, and this world is not done with me, I guess. This fantasy world's not done with me. So I'm working on a book right now, called that's the tentative code name is Logan Aiden versus the Hateful Strawberries. And so this is a series of books about a boy with ADHD,
Mhm.
that's in that 10-year-old range, kind of dealing with church life, quite frankly. And it's based on my experience with kids in youth ministry with ADHD and how hard it is for them. Most church environments are like the exact opposite of what an ADHD kid needs.
Mhm.
And most youth leaders and parents don't really know what to do or how to deal with it. And so I'm trying to highlight some of the reality of it from the child's point of view, because I have ADD myself, so it's one of these things where I didn't realize it. I didn't get diagnosed till I was an adult, but like if you go back to my behavior as a child, a lot of stuff makes a lot more sense now.
Mhm.
But really kind of getting into the head of a child like that, expressing it in a way that they're the main character, because typically in middle grade stories, a child that behaves like someone with ADHD is the bad guy.
Oh no.
If you think about the behavior, the acting out, the things like that, like I don't know if you've seen that Christmas Story and the Scott Farkas bad guy kid in that movie. Anyway, is an 80s movie, Christmas. Like if you look
Oh, A
at their
Christmas Story.
behaviors, yeah, if you look at their behaviors, most cases the bad guy kid probably just has ADHD. Most 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 of the time. And so if you're a child like that and you see someone in the story, more often than not, you see yourself as the bad guy. It's just true. It's sad. It's a very sad thing. So
Yeah, and
I'm
it's
trying to,
wrong.
yeah, I'm trying to basically say, no, you're not the bad guy. You just have issues that you have to work through and kind of work through those. And it's a very hard thing to write, to do well, because on the one hand, you do have to express bad behavior, or what everyone else would consider to be a bad behavior and act it out. You have to express it because it's just true. That's what's going to happen. I had kids in my thing that would, in my like church stuff, they would sit there and eat styrofoam cups for lack of anything else to do, right? Like they literally could not just sit there. So anyway, this story's a lot of fun though. It's got a raccoon in it, and it's something that actually the real life Logan helped me outline. So
Mhm.
creepy strawberries, raccoons, hijinks, but with this underlying message for parents and other people to pick up on if you know what you're looking for.
Well, that sounds wonderful. I of course have a lot of students with ADHD, and everything's got a spectrum. Like,
Right.
no two kids with ADHD are alike. And so
Absolutely
some
true.
kids with ADHD have like no impulse control.
Mhm.
And they'll just say something, sometimes horrible things that just come out of their. But then
Right.
the next person has total control over the impulse, and it's just they need to be like constantly active. And so,
Yeah.
so that's really great. They're real. I never would have noticed kids with ADHD being put as like the villain in shows, and so that's quite a shame. So I'm really glad you're writing your story, because more and more kids are getting diagnosed with ADHD.
Right. Yeah. No, well, and a lot of it I would argue is sort of screens related. I mean,
Mhm.
you've got children that from a very young age are being hyper exposed to stimulation all the time. And now you put them in a classroom environment that is not that level of stimulation. What else are you going to get? Right. Like, I mean, there's a level of that. And so that's one thing I'm working on. So that's like a second
Okay.
grade reader. I've got another one of those that is sort of a retelling of Daniel stories. So you had the story
Mhm.
of Daniel where he is asked to eat the corrupted food, so to speak, like things that
Okay.
were outside the law. And then there's the Lion's Den's the famous one, and Shadrach. There's some famous stories. So we're retelling those in this world. But my number one fan is actually writing the story. So I have an 11-year-old that reached out to me last fall and said, "Hey, Mr. Brocken, do you need help writing something?" Now, I intended to write this story someday, but I was
Mhm.
going to finish the whole Logan series because I only have a little bit of time before I worked on this one. And so her and I are working through this, and it's mostly her characters and ideas, but with a little bit of me kind of bringing it back or adding a lot of detail where it needs to. And then Meow Meow is getting his own story. Meow Meow Milks the Cow is a picture book I'm working on.
Wow. So you've got 3 different projects you're working on, and I missed it the first time, but the Logan
Mhm.
series, it's a series? How
Yeah,
many
yeah. So it's going to be focused on the fruits of the spirit. So there'll be 9 books in the series.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
but I'm releasing that one. I'm trying an experiment. I'm going to release it as a serial in my newsletter, and then when it completes, I'll print books based on that.
Okay. Well, I caught from the podcast I watched earlier that your goal is to publish, a book a year,
Mhm.
but this sounds like more so.
Yeah, well, so to be fair, this is like 320 pages. Okay. The Logan book's going to be 100 if that. The Talia book, both of those combined will be less pages than this.
Mhm.
And especially since I've got Talia helping me, I I'm not actually going to do less work on actually content creation. And the picture books, they're only 800 words. I mean, that's not that big of a deal. And I've got somebody else doing the illustration. So technically I'm actually working less on writing maybe, but I got all this other curriculum and audiobooks and all this other stuff I'm doing. So
And then you have your day job.
yeah, and then I have another job that yeah. So anyway, I well, it's the ADD. Like people ask me, how do you do it? And it's like, I don't know that like I get hyper focus. And when I get hyper focus, if I have a day I'm not actually at my day job, right? Like a federal holiday or something,
Mhm.
I can write 7 to 10,000 words in a day, right? Like I can just sit down and do it. And I don't know that everybody has that capability to just sit and focus and write like that. So
Right. I used to. I'm struggling right now.
well, I will tell you, I had to remove Instagram and mobile games off my all my devices because like it would just suck me back in, and I'm doing better now. I'm writing more effectively.
Everything. Is there anything else um you'd like to add or that I should have asked about?
No, I think you asked all the possible things I can think. I guess my last bit is if you are a parent, I highly recommend reading aloud to your children, regardless of like pick content that you'd like and trust. Read aloud to your children, and if they are learning to read, give them their own copy. Like you know, maybe you go get 2 copies on Kindle, or you go to the store and each of you buys one so they can do that because it will accelerate their reading. What I didn't realize until I did the academic research on this was that as I could read before I went to kindergarten because my mom got me a bunch of these little 45 RPM Star Wars records with the little book that would beep and tell you to turn the page. And
Mhm.
I learned how to read before I went to school and didn't know that that's how or why I was so accelerated in reading. But that's why. So I just highly, regardless of where you get the content, reading while listening with your kids is amazing.
Right. Okay. And that's perfect. I know studies, countless studies have shown that. So
Mhm.
excellent. Now, if I'm watching this and I want to buy your books, which I think there will be some viewers that are definitely going to want to. What's the best way to buy your books?
Towersoflight.net is my website, and you can get any of the resources I kind of flashed up. You can get that off my website.
Mhm.
And then, but also if you like Amazon, everything's on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, like any of your favorite online retailers, you can get stuff there as well.
Everything. Is there anything else? Um, Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us here.
Yeah, no, thanks. I had a great time. It was a great conversation.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for joining us. Feel free to subscribe, like us, rate us. Look forward to seeing you next time.